more current, which is a week ago, the world sort of witnessed the horrific murder by a police officer of George Floyd. And it's, for most African Americans or even blacks around the world, from America, it didn't seem as, it seemed as if this stuff we've always been seeing, videos of a police shooting this person. I mean, I think a couple of weeks ago we saw the image of a young black guy just jogging through a neighborhood, and somebody stopped him and shoots him. And I think even 2 days before George Floyd's murder, we saw a young black man who was just bird watching in a park, and a white lady was walking her dog, and he says, "Oh, this area, you need to put the dog on the leash because it disturbs the birds here." And she says, "Look, don't disturb me, I'm going to call the police." In fact, calls the police and says, "There's an African American man threatening me." And he says, "Look, I just told you to put the leash on the dog." And she says, "That's it," and she loses her job. But this is all within a couple of weeks, and it just seems as if America, the Black Americans and blacks everywhere, just sort of said that enough's enough. And somehow, from my point of view, it seems there is more of a momentum with what's happening now than in the past. I liken it to how when the Me Too movement sort of came up about a year and a half ago. It started with one I think it was Naomi Judge, who was an actress who gave an interview to a reporter in LA. Then that story, as it came out, other actresses jumped on and says, "Yes, this happened to me." And before you knew it, it became stuff that everyone knew about, but too afraid to speak about. But everyone thought, okay, we can jump on. And it's spread across where it's almost like they've gone back to the past. It's almost like hunting for Nazis. Like, yeah, he was a Nazi, and then it's like, oh goodness, he's had to lose his job and stuff. And it's been great, because if you have a daughter, a sister, a mother, you feel more comfortable now knowing that they will go into the work environment where they'll be safe, because everyone realizes that can't be condoned. So this is my hope, that this movement itself, I think it seems to be an awakening, that more people are seeing it for what it is and saying, not just the blacks, but also whites. But I wanted to get your perspective as a white person, not just with the video, but just the movement in general.
I think it's one of those kind of situations where it's like there's so many different emotions that kind of come up at the moment, especially with regards to, the like you kind of said, it's been a lot of events that have happened, sort of in what seems like quite a, sort of a short period of time, that has been like the catalyst for, sort of this incredibly important movement. And I think there's a real kind of frustration from, sort of from myself towards kind of when people aren't recognizing, sort of coming from positions of privilege, or, people abusing their privilege. And I think this has really, really opened, sort of, it's opened some really, really fantastic dialogue, and dialogue is going to be really, really important moving forward, because actually, as far as, sort of like nations are concerned and such, like, Britain has an absolutely disgusting history, and I think, we've had a tendency to kind of whitewash, massive elements of it, and, sort of, and kind of always portray kind of the British Empire as such a wonderful thing, where actually it's based off of so much kind of hurt, horror, and abuse. And I think it's sort of the other elements that kind of come to mind is, that I think that the message of Black Lives Matter is such an important one. And, sort of, and when you have kind of people coming in and saying this idea of, well, all lives matter, or, sort of, well, sort of, yes, they, sort of, yes, they matter, but they shouldn't be, sort of looting, or they shouldn't be kind of destroying property and such. And it's like, there's nothing about kind of the Black Lives movement that says about that it's, sort of, that it's just you know, sort of that it's purely saying that it's just Black Lives That Matter, but actually, you know, sort of it's those lives are the ones that are at risk, you know, sort of, and the ones that are, you know, as we kind of seen the fact that, you know, a white woman can, you know, can phone the police on the person who's giving, you know, who's actually just reaffirming the rules and regulations of the
Yeah.
park, and say, you know, and, you know, tell lies and say, I'm being threatened by an African American, knowing, you know, potentially what that could lead to.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, and I think, you know, sort of it's, I'm, you know, I'm always quite, I'm mindful that it's obviously it's not my position to kind of, you know, speak out on, and it's one where, you know, to listen and to absorb and to, you know, and to be an ally and to be kind of anti-racist rather than, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the question then is, because when the Me Too movement started, I'm not a female, and I've not been. I mean, some men were subjected to the same sort of thing, but it never happened with me, so I couldn't understand. I couldn't relate and say, yes, I know what it's like, but I could understand that how, you know, how it is to be victimized and be taken advantage of somebody who has a lot more influence and power, and I guess, yes, there's, you know, there was at first when the Black Lives Matter movement started, everyone said, oh, well, all lives should matter, and no one doubts that all lives matter. And actually, I'll be honest, when I watched the video of George Floyd being killed, I thought the focus was, a police officer killing an unarmed black man. And I thought, well, it's actually a man being so wicked that he's taken another person's life. And I wanted it to be focused on a police officer with influence taking another person's life, because I thought what that does is that it would make it less, it makes everyone realize that, oh, the police are supposed to protect us. Now they're killing people. But if it's like, oh, the police are meant to protect us, but they're killing black people, then it's like, don't worry, Steve, you can go to work. It's just black men that needs to be worried about, so you don't have to worry. So I thought, at first, I just thought, no, that it should focus on the fact that somebody in power, who's meant to protect, is actually taking lives. But what is really encouraging and surprising, that it has taken on, he's not the first. Many black people have died over the past couple of years, but there was something about this that has really struck the conscience of not only in America, but I would say over here in the UK, where employees have been sending out messages to all their staff to say, if you have any issues and concerns, we want to have a dialogue. The university, King's, they sent an email last week and said, we're going to have a quick, we want to have a webinar to have a conversation if anyone needs to talk. And it's as if everyone is saying, we're supporting our minority supports group, and we want to be able to give them the tools in order to address things. And it seems as if it's awoken a consciousness among other people that says, well, this is wrong, we didn't realize. And but and I've had friends who I've had white friends who haven't been seen it for a long time, emailing me and says, oh, they were worried, checking up on me and stuff like that. And so that's been a little bit awkward to, like, yeah, I'm fine. That's like that. But what is great is that there seems to be a younger generation that have integrated a lot more with people from color and diversity, and they are the ones who are leading the marches both here and abroad. They're the ones who make up the numbers and stuff. And yeah, have you, in your own experience, have you seen or had any encounters or things like that with friends or colleagues that have said, look, they've had issues because of their race, and in any university, secondary school, college, work, I mean, along your way?
I suppose I think, I think growing up, sort of the school that I went to, again, because it was in kind of like Medway towns, and, sort of back in the day, sort of it was a sort of a predominantly sort of white British school, but as but as kind of growing old, sort of growing older and such, going to university, going into the world of work, and kind of Medway becoming sort of a real sort of a wonderful place of kind of multiculturalism. Sort of I think there've been more kind of situations where I've sort of I have been out with friends and actually they've experienced and they may have experienced kind of I suppose the only way to define it is racial abuse, kind of when we've been out and about and such. And it is one of those things that is, sort of it feels, sort of it feels uncomfortable for me. So I cannot imagine how it would feel for them, sort of being in a position where they are, sort of where they're feeling attacked, sort of for an element of who they are. And I think sort of quite sometimes it might be that you feel in quite a powerless position because sort of obviously you can call after a person and call them every name under the sun, and tell them how wrong they are, but try sort of changing minds and things like that, especially kind of outside of things like passing sort of hateful passing comments, it's really difficult because people's people's beliefs and the way that people see the world is kind of created over their lifetime, and it's how you start to kind of unravel that hatred or unravel that kind of bigotedness.
Yeah.
Don't know if I answered your question there at all.
No, you did, and I guess and I guess you're right. It is about people. It's but as I said, it's good to see that there's finally some change as well.